I think it is really essential to be upfront and honest with your testers about what's happening in your pattern, and this wasn't that. Hello, fiber friends. Today I am confessing to my knitting crimes. So if that sounds like it will be of interest to you, I hope you'll stick around. Hello, knitting friends. Welcome back to the channel. I am your host, Kristen, a knitter and occasional knitting pattern designer, coming to you from the Maryland suburbs of Washington, D.C. And today I'm going to be confessing to my crimes against knitting and my crimes against yarn. So when we are learning to knit, we learn pretty early on that there are definitely things you're supposed to do, like swatching, and there are definitely things you're not supposed to do. And while there are no knitting police, of course, I do think it is important for knitters to learn the rules, because when you learn the rules, you can learn which rules are okay to break. I thought you might be interested to hear what rules I have learned that it's okay to break over my nearly 20 years of knitting experience. So I just thought I would share today a few of my most scandalous knitting and yarn crimes.
How scandalous!
Maybe so that you can learn from my example, maybe so that you can feel better about your own knitting and yarn crimes, whatever the case may be. I definitely want to hear about your knitting crimes, not that you never swatch. We hear that all the time. I want to hear about your secret knitting crimes that nobody will admit to. So definitely leave a comment if you have some to share. Before we get started, today I am wearing my Lilith sweater. This is a pattern by Megan Babin that I test knit for her last year, and I have knit this in Knitting for Olive Merino in the artichoke purple artichoke color, held with Amano Yarns Uma in the Forbidden City color. All right, let's get into the crimes. We'll start with one that's not too scandalous. Whenever I have to pick up for a collar, and it says make sure that you have picked up an even number of stitches, I never count the number of stitches I pick up. Mostly because most of the time I am knitting a 1x1 rib, and if I don't have an even number of stitches, I just fudge it at the end and decrease out an extra stitch. No big deal. I just cannot be bothered to count my stitch pickup for a collar. Now, if you are knitting a 2x2 ribbed collar where you need to pick up a multiple of 4, this doesn't really work as well. I almost never am knitting a 2x2 ribbed collar. I generally speaking don't like them as much. And if a pattern calls for one, I will usually just switch to a 1x1 rib and then not count my stitches as I pick them up. The same more or less goes for button bands. I don't make sure I have an even or an odd number of stitches, whatever the pattern is calling for. I just fudge it at the end after I have done the pickup, unless there is a specific reason that I need a specific number of stitches. I also, again, unless there's a specific reason that I need X number of stitches for my button band, I don't count. I just do 3 out of every 4 rows for the pickup. And so far, this has worked out okay for me. So that's probably my least scandalous one. I just can't be bothered to count. Too much counting, too much room for error. Pollyanna, stop that. The cat, it's shaking because she's playing with the tripod. Ma'am, no one can see you being cute, so you may as well stop. Next up, I guess this will be a yarn crime. I have never once in my entire life alternated skeins of yarn.
Not once.
Not one time. I just can't be bothered. It is a huge pain in the butt. I don't want to do it. Does that mean sometimes I finished projects and had kind of some weird pooling? Yeah, okay. If I'm going to knit with hand-dyed yarn, I feel like I have to kind of be okay with maybe a result that I wasn't necessarily expecting. I tend to use hand-dyed and especially more variegated hand-dyed yarns, mostly for socks, maybe hats, not really garments. But yeah, even occasionally when I will knit a garment with hand-dyed yarn, no, I will not alternate skeins. I just won't do it. I'm sure that knitters who do that end up with a better result than I do. But again, I cannot be bothered to alternate skeins. Now, this is something you don't, if you are unfamiliar, if you're using a commercial yarn, this isn't necessary. But if you are using a hand-dyed yarn, there tends to be more variation even in supposedly solid colors. And alternating skeins means rather than just knitting your sweater with one skein of yarn after another, you will knit, 2 rows with one skein and 2 rows from the next skein and go back and forth in order to disrupt any noticeable differences between the two colors. So you don't end up with like a line in the middle of your sweater, basically, if one of your skeins is not exactly the same color as another. And yeah, I'm not doing it. I've never done it, and I have no plans to start. No alternating skeins here. Next up, the sock knitters may be dismayed to hear I don't really darn my socks when they start wearing out. Pick up the sock! Pick up the sock! And I know that the point of knitting is to have long wearing garments, but the way that my socks wear out makes darning almost pointless. And so I actually have a little visual here. As I said, I have a little visual here. So this is a pair of socks that I have, and you can see this is where my socks tend to wear out, right here at the ball of the foot. So if perhaps, the toe of my sock wore out, I could pull it out and put a new toe on. But my socks tend to start wearing out here, which is right around the ball of the foot. And you can see my fingers through the sock here. So this is one that has already worn out. And pretty soon there's going to be a hole here. If I were to darn it, I might get a few more wears out of it, but it's just going to keep wearing out in that same spot. So and you can just almost see the pattern. So it's like my big toe and then down. So basically this whole part of the sock will wear out. It won't just spring one hole that is easy to darn, or like a toe is not going to pop out of the top and I can easily replace the toe. The entire sort of the base of the toe down and across the ball of the foot is going to wear out. And generally speaking, I don't have enough of a ball of yarn left after I've knit socks to be able to rip back all the way to here and then re-knit that for 2 socks. Yeah, so when my socks start wearing out, I basically just wear them until they're threadbare and then I throw them away. I had, in the past tried to darn my socks, but it just seemed like an exercise in futility. A hole would pop up here, so I would patch it, and then it would pop up over here, and then I would patch that, and then it would be up here. So just, I don't know what it is about the way I walk. I know a lot of people, it's heels and toes, and those can more easily be replaced than the whole, a third of the sole of the foot of your sock. So sadly, I don't know why that is, but it just doesn't make much sense to me to darn my socks. So I generally don't do it. I have, however, as I mentioned in the last video, been starting to try to use more often sturdier yarns. So of course these hand-dyed yarns are lovely, but even with the nylon, they are not, generally speaking, very hard wearing. So I have made that sort of adjustment. I am moving toward hardier yarns for my socks, but the fact remains, I don't darn my socks. And speaking of things that you are supposed to do, and I don't, I have a video here on the channel demonstrating how I knit colorwork carrying both yarns in my right hand, as I'm a thrower. And occasionally I'll get a question, how do you catch your floats using this method? And the truth is, I don't.
Not gonna do that, bud.
I almost never catch my floats unless we were talking about really, like 10, 12 stitches between. Then I might catch my float, but otherwise I just don't catch my floats. Just leave them there. um, to be fair, I don't knit a lot of color work. When I do knit color work, I tend to prefer smaller motifs, so we're not having those big long stretches of stitches that I have to carry floats across. I also think if you are knitting colorwork socks, something where you are like sticking your toes in and they might get caught in the floats, then maybe you would want to be catching your floats more often. I don't really knit colorwork socks. I haven't really. There are some really cute ones out there though, so that may change. What colorwork I do is tends to be garments. And if you are knitting a garment and using colorwork, generally speaking, at least it's recommended that you're going to be using a non-superwash yarn. So over time, the floats that are usually in the yoke with wear, they're going to kind of felt a little bit. They're going to felt together so that you don't really have to worry about anything getting stuck in the floats. It's not as if you're having floats that are big enough, for your head to go through. They're not that long. There's not really anything that's going to get stuck in the floats, generally speaking, if you're wearing a colorwork sweater. And then over time, as you wear it, the floats start to felt together, become more compact. Now there's even less of a chance of anything getting stuck in the floats. So yeah, I don't, if particularly if you have asked this question on that video, the truth is I just don't catch my floats, and that's why it's not a problem. If, as I said, we've got a big long stretch of stitches, 10, 12 stitches, something like that, and I do want to catch in the middle, I just, do it manually because I'm carrying both colors in one hand. I just wrap one around the other and keep going. So it would slow me down a little bit if I were frequently catching my floats, but I'm not. I don't catch my floats. Next up, I am sad to confess that, well, not too sad because I think it was justified, but we'll get there. I have ghosted a test knit.
Zoinks, ghost!
So you join test knits, maybe sometimes you don't finish. That happens. That's life. You don't finish things in time. That's not really what I mean here. So I had signed up for a test knit for a sweater that I loved, saw on Instagram, thought it was beautiful, very excited. And in applying for this test knit, the designer noted that a small portion of the sweater had wrong side cable crosses. I hate doing cables on the wrong side. I don't think it looks as nice. And it's just a pain because I cable without a cable needle. That's more difficult to do on the wrong side. It just really slows me down. But I said, okay, it says a small portion. So when I hear small portion, I'm thinking like maybe there's some short row shaping and on a couple of passes you have to cross on the wrong side, something like that. So I'm accepted to the test knit and I start and I am working away. I have bought a lovely yarn for this, not super expensive, but not cheap either. It was a Durum Natura Ulisse, although ultimately I used it in my Odyssey pullover. I'm reading through the pattern, so I usually do a first pass, read through, don't notice anything out of the ordinary. I'm working on the body of the sweater. I'm getting close to where, because it's bottom up, getting close to where we're going to split from working in the round to working flat for the yoke. So I'm looking ahead and I notice that for the entire yoke, so the front and the back worked flat, there are wrong side cable crosses. So the designer had said a small portion of the sweater had wrong side cable crosses. And by that meant 40%, maybe 35% of the sweater had these wrong side cable crosses. It was the entire yoke, front and back. And we had like a group chat for the test, and I was like, maybe I am misreading this. I even asked, I was like, okay, it looks like the cable cross is on an odd row or whatever, which would be on the wrong side. Is that correct? Is there an error? No, that's correct. And even one of the other testers was like, well, she did say a small portion was wrong side. And I was like, yeah, a small portion, not half the sweater. So I really felt, first of all, I didn't want to do wrong side cable crosses for 40% of a sweater. And I also really felt that the designer had misled testers about that particular element. And I was really upset. So I disappeared. And I have also made it a point not to knit any of that designer's patterns. And she, has plenty of other lovely patterns. And of course, that pattern was ultimately published. I've never knit it because I'm not going to do all of those wrong side cable crosses. And also, I have my little personal boycott of this designer just because I think it is really essential to be upfront and honest with your testers about what's happening in your pattern. And this wasn't that. So I have ghosted a test knit. All right, and saving the best or worst, as the case may be, for last, I have thrown away yarn.
The horror.
This is very specific circumstances, but it has happened several times. On a couple of occasions, but very rarely, I have purchased yarn from perhaps people who should not be making yarn. So people who maybe are, it's like at a farm market or something small like that. Somebody happens to have sheep. They decide they're going to go, make yarn, and it's not good. It's just not good quality. It is not actually soft enough for garments. It is, something that's more suitable for rug making, but whoever is the purveyor of this yarn just doesn't have enough knowledge. The spin, it's overspun, it's like, there is something legitimately wrong with the yarn. I have definitely thrown that away. I remember in particular, I got a very looked lovely in the skein, definitely rustic. And then when I tried to use it, it was just so overspun. It was just a mess. It was all over the place, thick and thin, overspun, twisting up on itself. It just looked like garbage. So I threw it away because it was garbage. That is rare, but it does happen occasionally when we're excited, we're traveling, we're visiting a new place. Oh, look, there's some yarn. It doesn't always work out that well. But there have also been occasions where I have had, yarn left over from a project. It's not really enough to do much with. I could probably save it for a scrappy project, but I don't really do a lot of scrappy projects. I don't tend to like things that are super multicolored. So scrappy projects don't always, call to me. And at some point, I'm just, I'm trying to organize. Maybe I'm cleaning out. I'm overstimulated. There is too much yarn. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. I don't know where to put it. Am I going to put it here? Am I going to put it in the closet of forgotten things? What am I? And I just throw it away. It represents too much of a decision for me to make. I don't know what I could possibly do with it. I don't like having it sitting around. I don't know where to put it if I wanted to save it. And I'm just overwhelmed by life. And I'm like, okay, I'm sorry. This is the easiest solution at the time. I feel terrible, but I'm going to throw this yarn away. And that, again, tends to happen when I'm trying to organize things. And it just doesn't seem to have a rightful place. It's not a nice new skein. It's not enough to use for, I can't just grab it and be like, oh, I could use this for a hat. That's fine. It's just not enough for that. It's a weird amount. There is no obvious place for it. And so, unfortunately, my, monkey brain is like, garbage. So, yeah, I have thrown away yarn on a few occasions. All right, friends, I hope you found this video entertaining at least. We all commit crimes against knitting. We all do things we're not supposed to do, or don't do things we are supposed to do. Everyone has some knitting and yarn crime secrets in their closet. Again, I would love to hear yours, so please do leave a comment. The most scandalous crime against knitting or yarn that you have committed. I would love for us all to be sharing them, make each other feel better, because, again, there are no knitting police, and we don't need to be carrying around guilt about something as unserious as knitting should be. It's all in good fun. So do share in the comments if you feel like you want to. Thank you again for joining me for this video. If you did find it entertaining, please do give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. New knitting videos here every Saturday. If you're looking for me on social media, you can find me on Ravelry and Instagram as Mania Peruana, and I will see you soon in another video.